The biblical perspective on knowledge contrasts sharply with the modern idea that knowledge is power. In the Bible, the story of Adam and Eve illustrates how seeking knowledge on one's own terms, eating from the tree of knowledge, leads to punishment and separation from God. It suggests that humans are better off in a state of innocence, trusting God's authority instead of pursuing independent understanding. Proverbs 3:5-6 reinforces this. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Here, blind trust in divine authority is upheld as the ideal. On the other hand, the modern principle of knowledge is power celebrates curiosity in the pursuit of understanding. Born from the Enlightenment, it rejects the notion that ignorance is virtuous, viewing knowledge as essential for progress, empowerment, and freedom. This perspective challenges the idea that trust without question is a virtue, arguing instead that ignorance limits our potential. These opposing views raise thought-provoking questions. Is blind trust the safest path, or does it hold us back? And does the pursuit of knowledge truly empower us, or can it lead to dilemmas we're not ready to handle? If these questions intrigue you, then stay tuned, because the show starts right now.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Today is January 26, 2025. I am your host, Sydney Davis Jr., and joining me is my friend and my honorable co-host, Scott Dickie. Scott, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Trying to keep warm up here, but, things are going well.
Excellent. Well, it's good to see you. I know that last time we hosted together, you were Rob Boss and I was a vampire.
I was channeling Rob Boss. And, since then, I've noticed a change in my soul. So maybe some of Rob Boss rubbed off on me. Who knows?
Yes, I think Rob Boss healed you in a way.
That could be. I'm hoping that your Dracula costume did not rub off on you, however.
It actually didn't rub off at all. That's why I still look like a vampire. I'm just gonna have to live like this forever.
Yeah, well, we each deal with the hand that we're dealt, right?
Yes. The hand that we're dealt in this life and the next life and the next life if you're a vampire.
Exactly.
Talk Heathen is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, and we have open lines, so get your calls in at 512-991-9242. Or from your computer, you can go to tiny.cc/callth. Another way to support us is by sending super chats. If we get, if we get super chats, there's like incentives and things like that. So
sure.
Please,
yeah, let's do it up.
Yeah, so send us those super chats. We'll read them. We'll show people that you sent them. We'll thank you here on screen. And most importantly, we'll continue to do Talk Heathen because I feel like, I'm totally biased, but I feel like our mission is very important. I don't know what you think, Scott.
I think so too.
You're like, not, absolutely not. All right. So question of the week. This is a segment we like to call Talk Heathen to Me. Let's see here. The question, I just lost it. The question of the week for last week was, if the New Testament were a comedy, how would it have ended? We have our top 3 answers, but before we get to those top 3 answers, Scott, how do you think it would have ended?
If the New Testament were a comedy, and how would it ended? Well, don't comedies always end with the hero living and winning? Isn't that how, wasn't the New Testament already written as a comedy? Isn't that like a Shakespearean comedy is when the hero lives, right? That's it. So I think it would end just with chaos and revelation, I suppose.
Scott coming in with hot takes. The New Testament is already a joke, but
Ayo.
Well, top 3 answers. We have number 3 from Godwin_7. And this person says, if the New Testament were a comedy, it would end with Peter being broken out of prison by an angel. Then the two of them are chased at high speed, Benny Hill style, through the streets of Rome by soldiers and random townsfolk to the tune of yakety sax.
I am going to revoke my answer, and I'm going to support Godwin_7. I think that one is way better than my answer. I love that.
This number 2, X-Million. The NT, the New Testament, ends with Lucifer pulling up in his 62 Cadillac convertible. He chainsaws Jesus down and jams it in the caddy shotgun. They drive off into the sunset, singing show tunes at the top of their lungs. I'm not going to lie. When I saw the word jams, I was worried about continuing to read that because it's the internet. But It didn't go where I thought it was going to go. So we like that. So they ride off singing show tunes at the top of their lungs.
Right,
I think we've seen that comedy for sure.
Yeah.
And then the number one answer, ironclad alibi, is if the New Testament were a comedy, how would it have ended? The New Testament would have ended with outtakes and Jesus laughing on the cross.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good one too. I'm still liking Godwin 7, but that one's pretty funny, especially if it would have been like an after credits scene too. That would be just perfect.
Yes, absolutely. I'm trying to think if the New Testament were a comedy, I feel like it would end with something to do with Jack Black. Whether you find out he's been Satan the whole time, whether you find out, I feel like Revelation would be him coming down with his rock band, and playing a song of some kind. I feel like he's got a song about the devil or something like that. I think so.
And in fact, I think what you just convinced me that's actually really the case of what it is. So
yes,
I'm considering converting just because of that.
He absolutely has one of those, and the end of times is coming. Like I can see it now. I also feel like The Rock would be involved just because he's been involved in a lot of disaster movies lately. But that being said, the prompt for next week is a lesser known tree in the Garden of Eden is the tree of blank. Enter the best answer below in the comments, not in the live chat. If it's in the live chat, we won't see it. But if you enter in the comments of this video, you can enter to win our top 3 comments for next week. Scott, what's your response to that? A lesser known tree in the Garden of Eden is the tree of blank.
Right. Well, we're all familiar with the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? But so I think there's a lesser known tree. It's a little bit further down, kind of on the left. It's the tree of knowledge of law and order. The tree of knowledge of law and order, like the dun dun, right? The Law and Order TV show. It's a funny thing. Our producer Richard didn't know, wasn't familiar with the show. He had no idea what I was talking about with that. But so what this tree does is when you eat, then you gain the ability to, or you might call it a curse, of whenever you come across a dead body, you have to say like some kind of smart aleck comment before you cut to commercial. For example, so Cain kills Abel, and then Adam and Eve are coming up and they find the body, and then Eve turns to Adam and says, well, maybe we should have called him unable, but and then they go into, then they cut to commercials.
They take a bite and like they look at the camera and they go, in the criminal justice system, sexually based offenses are considered especially heinous.
Right,
These
exactly.
Are their stories.
Yep.
That's great. Well, everybody watching, please enter your response to that in the comments, not the live chat, although you're welcome to put them in the live chat as well, in the comments in order to enter to win the top 3 comments for next week. But now we're going to go to the crew cam. I really want to thank our crew for today. If it weren't for the crew every week making these live streams possible,
Hooray to the crew.
Thank you so much, crew. Man, I cannot believe how many people it takes to get these shows to happen, and yet they still allow me to be involved somehow. I don't know.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, I feel the same way. I was like, well, how can you have Sydney involved? No, I'm just kidding.
No, really. It's like we all showed up here to have Sydney. Come on, like what do you do? So thank you so much.
There's a ton of people that are working behind the scenes, and it makes our job so much easier and makes us look so good in front of the world. So thank you to all the crew and all the hard work that they do.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, crew. In all sincerity, jokes aside, we really appreciate you and all the work that you do. Couldn't do it without you, literally and figuratively. So that being said, I don't know about you, Scott, but I think I'm ready to take our first call.
Me so hungry for some callers. So let's get going on the callers there, I think.
I was not ready for that.
All right. Yeah. So our first caller is Theo from New York. All right. Let's see. Let's get in. Theo, can you hear us? All right. What do you got for us today, Theo?
Well,
you're cutting in and out. Your audio's cutting in and out, Theo. The notes here say that you have something to say on biblical prophecy, specifically in Revelation and the rise of the Antichrist.
Yes.
All right. Hit us with it.
Have you read Revelation?
Yes.
So what about biblical prophecy? What so you're saying that Revelation is fulfilling prophecy, or what do you think? What's the point you're trying to make here with this?
Yes. The Antichrist.
Are you using a computer program to talk to us? This sounds like AI voice.
Yeah. No.
All right. Maybe we should, I think we got to get this, this audio taken care of. Theo, I'm going to return you to the queue. We do have another caller that we can take. So Theo, hopefully we'll come back to your queue or to your call, and maybe the call screeners can iron out whatever issue we have with your audio. So let's go to instead. We also have
Hello.
Jason, he, him, theist in Belize. And Theo wants to talk about the God I believe in is the real God. And Jason was invited to call in by Richard. So thank you for following up on that, Jason. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Well, I can hear you.
Lovely. Human voice.
All right. What do you got for us today, Jason?
Great. Well, what I have for you, what do you mean by that? Basically, I responded to his, I guess, to your community, whatever post. And
Okay.
I made a comment and then said he wanted me to discuss my claims.
Yeah.
I basically made the point that atheism is itself a faith. That's one claim I make. And I believe there's,
Okay.
I would say that there is nothing, there is no claim that is not faith-based, in my opinion. So that's why I don't like the word religion, because religion is basically applies to literally everything. So it's like saying
What do you
everything. So it doesn't.
What do you think faith-based means then in this context? What do you mean when you say everything, all beliefs are faith-based? That, to me, that kind of takes away the meaning of faith, right? So what do you mean by
how
faith?
do you define faith? Yeah.
Well, by faith, I mean you cannot prove it. You cannot say, here's proof that this is the true thing. And so to jump from claim to fact, you have to have faith to make that jump. That's my point.
Okay. Would you agree with the statement that perhaps some things are easier to prove or harder to prove than others? Would you agree if I were to say, even though maybe all belief systems are based on some level of faith, there might be some belief systems that are easier to follow or easier to prove than others, or there might be some that just have more evidence and more proof in existence than other faiths?
Well, some have more evidence than others. I would not use proof. Like I said, I don't believe in proof.
What do you
some have
think the
more
difference
evidence.
between evidence and proof is, out of curiosity?
Well, proof doesn't exist. Evidence does. That's a big difference. So what's the difference between a unicorn and a horse? Well, one exists and one doesn't.
Well, so first of all, I did want to thank you for calling from Facebook, because I think it was a Facebook chat you said you're on, because we do appreciate when people do that. So that's my first question for you is, what makes you say that evidence isn't real and proof is real? Or maybe it was the opposite. Why do you say that one is real and the other one isn't? What makes you think that, or what have you read that led you to believe that?
Well, I just know how the so-called sciences work, and how mathematics works, and how legal process works, and it's not proof-based. None of it. It's all theoretical, evidence-based things. There's no proof in the whole mix.
But why, if you say that you know how science works and you know how math works and you know how legal processes work, why do you say there's no evidence for that if you know how they work? If there's steps that you follow in order to get them to work correctly, why do you think that doesn't exist?
Well, evidence exists, I'm saying, but you can evidence literally any claim on the earth. You can make a claim, and I can find evidence for it.
But do you think that's true? Is that do you think that's true, or how can you find evidence for anything? Yes. I know that you can find opinion for most things. You can find people saying they agree with you on most things, but why is that the same as proof? Why is that the same as evidence, as opposed to just finding opinions that agree with you?
Well, if you think about it, opinions is what we go by from birth. From our school days, we get the teacher's opinion or the opinion from the state that's taught to the teacher. They cast it down to us. We memorize it and regurgitate it, and that's.
Can opinions be
You
taught,
can call it opinion.
or does that no longer make them that person's opinion? Like if somebody feels a certain way, is that something that can be taught, or is that belief? Is that something they truly believe?
That's a good question. Can you kind of rephrase that?
Yeah. So, for example, Scott can tell me that jalapenos are gross, but if my opinion is that jalapenos are gross because I've tried them and I think they're gross, versus if Scott just tells me they're gross and I'm supposed to think they're gross, is that truly an opinion? Wouldn't opinions be based on personal belief, as opposed to, like, a teacher can't teach you an opinion, they can teach you their opinion, and whether or not you agree with that then becomes your opinion, as opposed to it's not really your opinion if you're just forced to believe something because somebody told you needed to. Does that make sense? I feel like I could have said that better.
Yeah, so you're basically trying to come up with the difference between opinion and belief. Is that what you're trying to?
Yeah. So, like, if I truly believe something, I believe it. But if Scott tells me I have to believe something, is that really my opinion, or am I just going with it because he told me I have to, regardless of what I think?
You're just repeating. So no, if you don't believe it, then it's not your opinion. Right? It's just somebody else's opinion, and you're repeating.
So let me ask you this then. When you hear about God and Jesus and Christianity and things like that, do you think that that is more credible than atheism and the lack of belief in God and there being no God in existence? Is there one to you that rings more true than the other?
Yeah, but that's kind of like, okay, so yeah, I don't really like how you're phrasing the question. It's kind of a loaded question.
Well, how is it loaded? Out of curiosity, asking you your thoughts on which one matters most to you, how's that a loaded question? Or which one is more believable to you? I'm literally just curious.
Yeah, that's a fair question. Yeah, I would say I came to it through reasoning, through testimony, through experience, through evidence. I didn't come to it as an opinion. The vast majority of my family is atheist, so I didn't come to it from my school was public school. They didn't ever mention they mentioned Christmas, but that's about as close as you get. So
why is the evidence that you heard about Jesus and God and Christianity, why was that evidence, what made that evidence good enough for you to change your beliefs to that system, but other evidence, say for science and for math and for certain things you've read about the American legal system, why is that not credible evidence?
Well, you have to be a little more specific than that. It's quite a broad question. You're trying to generalize in all systems of knowledge.
Well, I mean, in your opinion, this is just in your personal opinion, what made you go, oh, that sounds like something I would rather follow than the say atheist belief system?
Yeah, Jason, you were mentioning that you came to your conclusion via a process of reasoning and evidence. So I think what Sydney is asking you is, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah.
On that reasoning? What was the reasoning that you went through, and what was the evidence that you considered when you landed where you are right now?
Okay, and I'll just let you know that I was atheist and agnostic for most of my life. This is pretty new development.
Okay,
so it's not like I was born. Baptized or whatever, and just repeated the parental dogma. No, I grew up in basically, Rust Belt, U.S. Very much has turned away from God a long time ago. So it didn't come from that route, I would say. But so you make a good question. That's a good question. How did I come to this? It took a lot of time, honestly, and a lot of experiences, and it's just kind of like, I'm like a seeker, and so I've always been seeking since. That's something I've always been. I was always into Bigfoot and UFOs and stuff when I was a kid, and history, just trying to figure out what the mysteries of life,
Yeah. And honestly, that's how it should be. Like, I love when people tell me that they're always curious and they're always learning and they're always seeking. So what is it when you're seeking, when you're looking for the truth on something, whether it's religion, whether it's Bigfoot, whether it's UFOs, whether it's anything at all, what is it that piques your interest and makes you say, wow, this sounds correct to me, as opposed to something else like that you doubt or that you don't think is enough evidence? Because you mentioned science, and the way you said so-called science makes me think that you've heard enough that you don't believe it. So I'm just curious, when you're seeking these answers in various aspects of your life, what is it that makes you believe it and think that it is more credible to follow that direction and that ideology and that thought process versus evidence you find that isn't good enough?
Well, I mean, if we just stick with science for a second, then I would say you look at like the trends of science over the past 100 years. You look at the kind of motivational factors. I would say motivation is a huge factor that people don't really consider. They consider it in court trials, but people don't consider it in science. It's kind of considered to be immune from bias or corruption or I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but they're not looking for motives. You know, they're not looking for corruption or that kind of thing. And if you look in those kind of things, the truth becomes much clearer, and you see a lot of like, where does this lead? Who does this profit? Who does this persecute? What is the underlying factor behind it? Where does this lead to? What's the historical factors of it? What scientists were there in history that came up with opposite theories to that, and how did their life go, and how did their, how true are their claims, and so there's a lot of little moving parts to that.
Do you think that there's any argument for religion having a motivation or spiritual beliefs having a motive or motivation to get people to believe them or to get people to follow them?
There's absolutely immense amounts of corruption in all churches in the world, and cathedrals, and what do they call the temples, and whatever the different buildings are called. Oh yes, people are corrupt generally. People are generally corrupt. I mean,
I feel like we're straying from the question here. Jason, we want to know, and excuse me, I apologize if I am mishearing what you're saying here, but so you had mentioned that you had some reasoning and evidence that kind of led you into believing of the existence of a God, and then furthermore that the Christian God is the real God. I mean, you claim that. I mean, part of the reason you called in is that you felt you were justified in believing in your God, and kind of that's what I mean, the things that you're saying now, is that kind of what you're presenting as your evidence, or is that, are we missing the question here? Because to me, I'm not seeing the connection. I don't see, listening to what you're saying, to me, that doesn't seem like anything that would motivate somebody to believe in a God, much less a Christian God.
Well, it would motivate, because if you can see that all of your species is corrupt and vile, then you look for something better. I mean, don't you think so? Or are you going to stick with you're going to just cast your vote for whichever vile individual you think is better?
So you're saying humanity is corrupt, therefore there must be a God? Is that your argument?
I'm saying it leads to a motivation to want to seek a God. Yes,
I can see that, but we're talking about the answer to the question. We're talking about the end goal of the seeking. Are you seeking a God, or are you seeking the truth, or are you seeking, a specific God? I mean, to me, it still doesn't seem. Sure, if one looks at one's situation, one's environment, and feels that there must be more, or that there must be an explanation, or that there must be something out there, that's one thing. That, having that sense of awe, having that sense of curiosity, having that sense of desire to learn about your world is one thing, and I can see many things, including the things you're talking about, motivating a person to perhaps seek out some kind of explanation, or seek out some kind of, why or reasoning or that kind of thing. But then you went an additional step to say, okay, I've thought about that. Now I've come to the conclusion that there is a God and that it is this particular God more so than the other options for God. And that's really the connection that we're looking for, I think. How did you actually, you said you were an atheist before, and so you didn't believe in a God, and then you did. And so what I want to know is, what was the line of reasoning and evidence that you hinted at before that led you from those two different states?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot
While
of
you're,
well,
sorry, could you? Nope.
Well, think back to when you first realized that you believed in God. Okay, if you were an atheist at one point, you must have at least realized, wait a minute, I believe in a God now. So maybe focus your thoughts on that particular moment when you first realized it. What was happening to you then? What were you thinking about during that period of time? During those days, what kind of conversations were you having? What kind of articles were you reading? What kind of information were you taking in to make that connection?
Well, I can say first off that it was not a light switch type of moment or something. Like I was like a certain age, and suddenly I went from. It was a very gradual. I would say first of all, I was kind of like atheist my teens, and I kind of went into agnosticism, for lack of a better word. And then I kind of went into spent some time in the sort of new age thing. And then I was kind of like, I don't even know the labels for some of these things, but I was kind of like a soft Christian, so to speak, for a while. And then I started interacting more with I did some Bible studies. Different Bible studies, did Bible studies with a Korean pastor, started going to church in Belize. Mainly we started going to church in Belize because we were bored. Belize is a ghost town more than a year. And then I started listening to that preacher, and that was very, very enlightening. And also over the years, I've been to things like near-death experiences. That definitely is a major piece of evidence. If you look into recent research into, I'll just start listing evidence randomly in no particular order. And then if you look into the Shroud of Turin, for example, that's a mind-blowing. Honestly, that's enough to convict, lack of a better word.
Is that what convinced you, the Shroud of Turin, or near-death experiences, or?
That's all just played a role over time, I would say.
So it sounds like you value. It sounds like you value personal experiences, and it sounds like you value things that you've been through as evidence to yourself that certain things are true, like certain experiences you've had, certain people you've met, certain places you've been. Would you say that, in your opinion, counts as more evidence or proof of the existence of something than, say, peer-reviewed research and tests that have been run and studies that have been done? Would you say that your personal experience weighs more heavily than that information?
No, I would not. I also use.
I just mean in your opinion, like when it comes to making a decision.
No, I definitely factor in. Other people's opinions immensely, and other people's testimonies more is a better opinion.
How do you think near-death experiences supports belief in a God?
Well, first of all, if you don't believe in a God, then you just die and then it goes black, right? And that's it. You don't have any experience.
Okay. My question, though, was how does near-death experiences support belief in a God? So you're saying that if you don't have... Wait, say again what you said. I don't want to misquote you there.
Basically, I'm saying that if there's no God, I guess I would equate that with no afterlife. Then that's it. Lights out when you're dead, right? And that's it. Or maybe there's a few minutes where your brain is still clicking or whatever. But
would it be fair to say that you're making some assumptions in there? First of all, you're assuming that there can't be an afterlife without a God, for one thing, and you mentioned that, right? And so, but you're also assuming that the near-death experiences are evidence of an afterlife. Do you think that's the case?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so let's explore that a little bit. How do you think near-death experiences, and really all we have are reports of near-death experiences, right? That's not something that we can't share that experience directly with anyone. And so we have these stories of near-death experiences, how do you think that those indicate the existence of an afterlife? Because near-death experiences are not people that have died. It's near death, right? It's people that are creating these stories during a time of where their brain may be starting to shut down. I mean, dying really is a process, right? It's not, except in certain circumstances, it's not something that happens all at once. And so there's a process. Your brain kind of starts shutting down. It starts getting flooded with all these chemicals. Many things happen to you while you're in the process of dying, including things that affect your perceptions, things that can affect your vision, can affect your hearing, can affect your memory, can affect your sense of time, can affect your sense of your oneness, your personal being, and that kind of thing. So all these different things are functions of your brain that can be affected during this process of dying or beginning to die. How do you make that extra step where, well, people must be able to think after they die?
Well, that's a good point. So, and I hear what you're saying. You're saying the mainstream that is the mainstream idea that we're a physical body that passes away slowly at the point of death. And it's a process, as you mentioned. Well, a lot of the near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences basically are counter evidence to that claim. I mean, basically, there's numerous people that say they were out of body, and they actually saw and heard what was going on in rooms that were not really remote, not adjacent to the room where their body is. And they're actually out of their body because they can even see their body. Oftentimes they can see their body laying there as a third person. So becomes clear that we're not our body. That would be my claim and what these testimonies point to.
Let me ask you a question though, because you bring up an interesting point here. You talk about how numerous people have experienced these things and numerous people have stories. What is it about numerous people saying there is a God and numerous people saying, I have evidence to suggest there is not a God. I have experience to suggest there is not a God. And scientists saying, like lots and lots of scientists saying, we have all found the same information the same way. What is it about those three scenarios that makes the numerous people giving you their personal testimony that God is real being more believable than the numerous people giving you their legitimate testimony that they don't think God is real, or numerous people giving testimony that certain scientific processes are true? What is it about the testimonies of one that make them more legitimate or more believable than the others?
Okay, well, I can definitely partly answer that. One partial answer to that question would be the changes that come out of these findings. So basically, when a scientist produces a new, let's say, equation or a theory or a new some kind of discovery, right? I mean, he typically gets Nobel Prize and gets awards, or gets raised at his job, or gets upgraded to distinguished professor, gets to publish more books. They get tangible, benefits from that, right? Whereas a person with a near-death experience, they're often ridiculed for the same, and a lot of people don't even believe them. It's like, and not only that, but a lot of people, they go from gangsters or criminals to like pastors, like they make a radical change in personality, oftentimes from atheism to Christianity, or from even from Islam to Christianity. These things have all happened numerous times. And so it's like a radical change in addition to motive, I would say.
Well, wouldn't you say, though, that Christianity, its entire basis is about the benefits that you get for following Christianity? Wouldn't you say that the whole, and this is coming from somebody who's a formerly devout Christian, the entire purpose is that you follow God and you believe in Jesus, and you get the benefits of eternal life, salvation, grace, God's eternal love. If you proselytize to enough people, they're brought to the opportunity to receive heaven and receive eternal life and God's love as well. So if anything, wouldn't you say that scientists are more likely to stick their neck out to ridicule? And that does happen all the time. People get ridiculed and then later found to be having told the truth, or to have discovered something that was later backed up by science. Wouldn't you say that actually the entire purpose of Christianity and following God is because of the benefits at the end, and because of the promise of eternal life and salvation and seeing your loved ones in heaven and singing at the gates? If anything, I might think that people who switch from being non-pastors to pastors recognize that there is a huge benefit to doing that. One, here on earth, because people donate money to the church, people worship them, people follow them, literally and figuratively. They get a lot of attention, they get a lot of fame for being a leader of the church. But then also, if they truly believe that there's an afterlife, they do believe that they will get special benefits for having done all of that stuff here on earth, regardless of how they were, received by other people. I mean, would you argue that that's a fair point?
I would say people are here and now motivated for benefits as opposed to benefits at the time of their death. People generally don't want, basically people like immediate gratification, right? I mean, that's pretty much become more the case in the past 20 years than ever. And so
the gratification for what? So sorry, say that again.
And immediate gratification is the name of the game in today's mainstream. I mean, would you not say? I think that's worldwide. That's what people want. They don't want to wait. They don't want to wait. If you're in your teens, death is a long ways away, and so it's not really a motivational factor to want to testify that you had a near-death experience so that you can get, a great afterlife. I don't think that's, they want a million followers. They don't want, they're not too cared about a great afterlife.
Wait, but that I think that kind of proves the point I was trying to make, is that by sharing something like a near-death experience, you get a lot of TikTok followers, you get a lot of YouTube likes and views and comments, you get a lot of attention on this earth. And then also, if you believe that there's a God, you also get the same reward in the afterlife for being a Christian. I don't know, if I heard you incorrectly, feel free to correct me.
Well, first of all, I don't think being Christian pays off materially generally. I know there's exceptions to that, and I know there's a lot of what I would call criminal pastors that have their own private jets and things, but that's quite the exception to the general rule. And a lot.
What's the general rule? What's
the general rule is Christians are persecuted. It's a general rule and mocked.
But that's actually not the general rule at all. And I think that's also, it changes a lot, I would say, geographically, demographically. Here in America, Christians actually run everything, both in a literal sense and a figurative sense. We are quite quickly becoming a Christian nationalist country. And so if you say that Christians are persecuted, it depends on where you are and what you're seeing with your own eyes. But I can tell you, if you care about people's personal experience being fact, then care that my personal experience is actually that Christians are not persecuted. They're actually quite revered. They're actually given a lot of power and they're highly revered in this country. And not only that, but you can't even watch true crime without hearing about how somebody was a great Christian and that's why they couldn't be the murderer in that instance. That Christians get a lot of leeway in first world countries. And if you say that personal experience is evidence, then that means I actually have a lot of first person evidence to suggest that that's not true, that Christians aren't persecuted. If we're talking about, the 1300s, or if we're talking about the wars that happened, back in the 17th century, maybe there's something to talk about there about Christian persecution. But I can tell you with all sincerity and personal experience that right now in the first world, Christians reign supreme.
I would disagree with that completely. I'm sorry.
But that's
Really?
not what I'm saying is that's not something that that's just how it is. Like that's not something that I personally think. That's just statistically the way that it is.
Where's this Christian force that you're pointing to? You're kind of inventing things. U.S. is
Inventing?
becoming a Satanist country, if anything.
No, in fact, the state of Oklahoma just implemented the Bible being considered a textbook in all public schools.
Right, there's exceptions, but that's one of the 50 states.
But you can't ask me for an
No.
example, and then when I give you an example, tell me that doesn't count because it's an exception.
It counts, but I'm saying it's outweighed. You can't say it's a majority. When it's not a majority, it's far from a majority. Yeah, there's exceptions like Oklahoma. Parts
The
of
state of
Nevada,
Louisiana just passed a law that requires all schools to list the 10 Commandments in their public schools. They have to be posted visibly for students to read.
Well, that's just another exception, right? I mean, every time we bring something up, it's going to be an exception. And I mean, when do you, I mean, you're actually arguing that Christianity does not dominate the landscape in the United States. Is that what you're saying?
I would say Satanism dominates the United States, and that's why I left.
But that's
I think ask any Satanist and you'll get a different answer from that.
And I mean this as respectfully as possible. Statistically, that's not true. Not even in my opinion, not even in Scott's opinion, not even what benefits us. Statistically, that is not true. Like evidentiary, like wise, I guess, that is simply not true. In fact, I would say that Satanism might even come up as one of the smallest populations in the United States. But if you look at the evidence, if you look at the statistics, if you look at people taking polls, and if you look at polls that were held both by private and public institutions, you will find that in the first world, Christianity is not only very prevalent, very popular. Obviously, there's different denominations and types and versions, but it's very popular. And also, if you look at the statistics, the lawmakers in a lot of different states and towns and countries, but especially in the United States, count themselves as Christians. They register or they answer these polls as Christians. We have a lot of Christian influence in laws, in rules, in governance, in social aspects, right? One of the first things my husband noticed when we moved to Tennessee is the first question people would ask him when they found out he just moved there was what church he goes to. And when he said he didn't go to a church, he would always either be responded to with a recommendation for a church to go to, or people would stop talking to him because he said he did not go to church. So 70.6% of U.S. citizens identify as Christians, according to Pew Research. I'm just saying, we can say all we want that we wish that wasn't the case. I'm not making that up. Scott's not making that up. In fact, we both do not benefit from those numbers. We both actually lose benefits because of those numbers. You would think that if we wanted some gain, we would say that atheists were in charge, atheists run things, Satanists run things, but we don't like those numbers. Those numbers work against us, and we're still willing to tell you that 70% of the citizens in the United States, in a first world country, identify as Christian. And many of those are policymakers here in the United States. Churches are also exempt from taxes.
Sorry, I just want to quick interject here. I just want to say we're straying from our discussion of the evidence. I would love for us to circle back around to that at some point. I do think the discussion on religion in American society is valuable, and so I want to make this a quick interruption here. But I would like to circle back around to this idea of the evidence to support the God belief in the first place. But I'm sorry for the interruption. Please continue.
Thank you for bringing us back. I keep going on tangents. I appreciate you bringing us back, Scott.
5 to 8 states that are still dominantly Christian, but out of 50. So.
Where do you get that evidence?
And then
where do you get that?
Doesn't exist.
No, where do you get that statistic from?
Just from talking to different people in different states and experience in different states, living in different states.
But
okay, so elaborate on that. What are the people that you talk to, and what are the experiences that you've had that support your conclusion there?
I grew up in New York.
Okay.
And if you're going to try to say that New York is a Christian state, you're going to have a hard time making that argument. pretty much anywhere in the Northeast, I would say, is pretty much heathen, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. You use that word. I don't use that word. And I moved to Colorado, and Colorado was a conservative state for many years, but that has changed dramatically. I don't know if it's because of the influx of Californians or just effective. I don't know what the cause of it is, but it's become a very blue state in political terms.
You're saying that you think that America is not in a Christian dominant nation, and your reasoning is that you lived in New York and then you moved to Colorado?
No, it's not just those two states.
I don't see any connection whatsoever there.
Also, the majority of New York State is actually Christian. It's just outweighed by the number of people who live in New York City who don't always identify as Christian. But the state as a whole, very much like the state of Colorado, where Denver might be, you know, a blue dot or something of non-religious people, many states are actually quite Christian. There just happens to be one largely populated city that has fewer Christians in it. So whether or not we're talking about New York City or New York State, I would actually argue that New York State still is vast majority Christian when it comes to the people who live outside of New York City. One of the largest religious institutions is in Utah.
General trend seems to be that the more populated the area, the less Christian I would say. That's nationwide. And
okay, but that doesn't mean that the state is not Christian, or that the legislation in that state is not Christian and lean Christian and make decisions based on Christian values.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, it depends what specific issues you're talking about. You're talking about abortion,
so
gun rights, you're talking about Bible in schools. I mean, there's a lot of different factors.
So I lived in Chicago, Illinois, and one of the largest educational institutions there is Moody Bible Institute, which is not only a religious university, but it's a religious university that does not make its students pay tuition. If you get accepted into Moody Bible Institute, you get to go for free. I think the only thing you have to cover is like your food or something like that. So that is, and it's right in the middle of Lincoln Park, which is a very highly populated neighborhood that also has Christian private high schools there. And I lived there. I saw it with my own eyes. If we're talking about personal experience, I went to Moody Bible Church until my mid-20s when I deconverted from Christianity. So I know this firsthand. It's the largest church and it's one of the largest religious schools that you can go to. And not only can you go, but you can go for free, right? So you can't say that just because these large cities have a lot of liberal or have a lot of non-religious people, that religion doesn't make a huge presence in these places, because they do, right? I live in a large city now. I'm not going to tell you where because I don't want to dox myself, but there is a large Christian and a large Mormon population here as well. So faith still matters. And it's still, this state that I live in also passed a lot of laws that were religious based recently. So we can't say that just because there are large cities someplace, that means the whole state has leaned non-religious, because I promise you that is not the case. And even in the northern states you're talking about, outside of the very large cities, which also have churches in them and religious people in them, the vast majority of the people who live in the United States, 70.6%, according to Pew Research, which is a very, very valid and very trustworthy source, says that people identify as Christian here.
Well, it's an interesting bunch of ideas there.
Well, maybe this would be a good opportunity for us to kind of rein in the. I mean, I love the discussion here, Jason. I appreciate your call. I'm glad that you called in as a response to a discussion you had on Facebook. I think that's awesome. You claimed you had evidence for God. You kind of dipped your toes in the discussion and then kind of split off a little bit. Would it be fair to kind of bring the discussion back to that, about to your evidence for God? Because I think that's going to affect the rest of the discussion as well. And you claimed that you were an atheist at one point and something changed you into a theist. I apologize if I'm taking over or if I'm derailing the conversation here, but I do want to address that. I want to make sure that we address that specific thing before we end our call. I want to know, I'm seeking the truth too. I want to know the evidence that you have, because if you have good evidence, I want to be right. Okay. I want to be correct about the things I believe in the universe. And if there's a God, I want to know about it. And so please tell me this path that you've taken. I want to know, you mentioned near-death experiences. If you'd like to focus on that at first, I think that would be wonderful. You also mentioned something about corruption and somehow that is kind of either motivating your search or
Right.
providing evidence for the search itself. What are you saying here? What's your evidence?
Yeah, I'm kind of casting a broad strokes. I agree. It does cast motivation and evidence, because the Bible says there's no such thing as a good person multiple times, and that's been
I know lots of good people, so the Bible's wrong. So what else?
Not according to God's standard. None of them are good people.
I don't give a fuck about God's standard. So what's next?
Okay, well, that's the point that I was making. That's the reality. Whether it's you can have your own standard, but that's doesn't help much. Just like you can have your own law if you want, but it doesn't prevent you getting arrested. Same thing with God.
So convince me. Take out the law book, point to the law, and then show me how it applies.
Applies to what?
Show me the money, right? I want to know the evidence. I want to know what it is that makes you think that there's a God. Do you want to talk about near-death experiences? Do you want to talk about my perspective on things? Do you want to talk? Just because, you said that the Bible says that there's no good people. I pointed out that I know many good people, and you said what? Because I'm using the wrong standard for that? If there's a different standard for measuring good people, why would that concern me? We could say somebody's good if they're over 6 feet tall. Convince me that that's a good.
The Bible doesn't actually say there's no good people. It says we're all born original sinners, but it doesn't say that there's no such thing as good people. In fact, it gives multiple scenarios and stories of where people were good and they did good things and they did things in the name of God that were good. So I'm confused why we even think the Bible says that there's no good people, because it doesn't say that at all, unless we're talking about original sin.
You didn't go to Bible school if you don't know that fact, or you weren't taught it.
So you, as somebody who did go to Bible school, now can educate us. So educate us.
Well, let me find the verses. Give me a second. They called Jesus good. There's one of the I don't memorize the verses, but this guy.
So let's assume you're right. Let's assume you're right that there are no good people on earth. So what? Okay, so now is that evidence for God?
No, it's not. Well, is it evidence of God? No, but it's evidence of the truth of the Bible, is what it's evidence of.
Well, something that if the Bible says there's no good people and there are in fact no good people, then the Bible says something that's true. That can happen all the time. There's lots of books that can say things that are true. I'm a big Tom Clancy fan. Tom Clancy writes amazing stories, and much of what's in the story corresponds with what is real. Does that mean that Jack Ryan is really an analyst for the CIA and looks a lot like Alec Baldwin and goes in submarines and stuff? Is that evidence that that's true?
No, it's not.
Okay. I think that, and do you think it would be fair to apply that same standard to what you're saying?
The fact that if it has truth in it, that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a true work, is what you're saying?
Right, because there are if there are things written in the Bible that happen to be true, we happen to disagree that there are no good people. But even if we assume for a second that that's true, right? Even if we assume that there are no good people, and even if we assume that the Bible says there are no good people, Sydney brought up some counterpoint to that. But even if we give you that much, even if we give you there are no good people, the Bible says there's no good people. Yeah, obviously, a work of literature or writing or reporting or however you want to describe it in as neutral a way as possible no matter how much there are little bits of truth in there, there could be things that are not true in there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So how do we know that the existence of a God is one of the true things in the Bible?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. Basically, to me, if you're looking at just the Bible as proof of itself, it's kind of what you're digging at, right?
No,
I mean, it sounds like you think that. It sounds like because the Bible says something, you give that enough credence and weight to believe that that's true. So we're saying in the event that the Bible says something like there are no good people, things like that, that you deem to be true because the Bible says it, wouldn't you agree that that means you also are saying that the Bible is true because the Bible says so?
Well, that's not how I came to it. I came to believe the Bible is true, and then
How?
the fact that it's true, then I found other things within it that are applicable.
You're skipping over the interesting part.
Right. We're still trying to get to the original question, which we're close to right now. How did you come to the idea that the Bible is true? What made you say this right here makes me believe that this is true?
Well, I can tell you it's a numerous things. It's not just one thing or one event. But
give it to us. We'd love to.
I would
give
say,
us the numerous things.
Well, one of the things I can say, which you probably will mock me or whatever, which is fine.
We don't mock people.
But, okay, great. So basically, biblical cosmology, I believe is true. I've come to believe that it's true.
How?
And how what?
How did you come to believe it's true? You keep listing things that you believe are true, and we just want to know, how did you come to the belief that things were true? What was the thing that made you say, I've seen enough to believe that these are true?
But even more than that, you already agreed, Jason, you already agreed that there could be true things in the Bible, and that doesn't make everything true in the Bible. And so when we ask you, why do you think the God claims of the Bible are true? And then you talk about cosmology, that's maybe the Bible. What if the Bible were true? What if any mention of cosmology, the order of the creation of the universe, the status of Earth among the heavens? What if the Bible was right about the cosmology, about the origins of the universe, about the nature of much of the universe? How would that support the existence of a God character? Because the God character might be one of all of the things that you're bringing up, even if they were true. I don't think that they are, but even if they were, how would that get you to that conclusion that there's a God? I mean, we've been asking this question, and it's starting to sound like a broken record, but I think that we are having a valuable conversation here, and it's enlightening to me. I'm a student of human nature, and so I love hearing how people generate their conclusions and how people come up with their opinions and how people support in their own mind their conclusions. But I really want to delve into that. How do you make that connection between the things that you've seen in the Bible that you've determined that are true? And again, whether or not we agree is a separate issue, but you have decided that they're true. And then you make that extra step to the God claim. Okay. So even if we agree that there are true statements in the Bible, it's that statement that we're talking about. And so is there a connection there? And I want you to consider this. Maybe people come to conclusions not based on solid reasoning, even though they feel they've done it based on solid reasoning. I mean, certainly you would agree with that. There are people in the world that have come to improper conclusions based off of the things that they know, even though they feel strongly about it, even though they feel justified about it. I'm a math teacher. I know I see a lot of this. I see a lot of people who give answers and then feel justified in their answers, but then I can point here, and here, you're missing steps. And so you're in fact not justifying your answer. Based off of that, how can you make that last connection to that God claim. And that's really what we're looking for. And I'm not being nitpicky because I think you're necessarily intentionally being evasive. I think what you're saying to us is honest to how you're thinking about it. And I appreciate that honesty, but I want us to set aside that aspect of it. And I want to focus on showing your work. And so how do you get to that conclusion of the God claim? So, and I don't want you to bring up other Bible verses because we've already agreed that some things in the Bible can be true and other things in the Bible can be false. And so we have to think about that. The claim, is that something that we think is true? And why do we think that that thing is true?
Okay.
Any thoughts on that, Jason? Can you expand on that? And I also want to give you the option of maybe you haven't thought that deeply, and I don't want to imply any laziness on your part or anything like that. But maybe you just haven't thought about that particular claim in that way. Maybe you came onto this call thinking you were feeling justified, and maybe you actually weren't, and that's fine. That's not necessarily deception on your part. Oh. It could be you just weren't thinking of it that way. And so now that we're kind of focusing on that question, what is your reaction to that?
Can you give me a short version of the question you're asking?
Sure. So we've talked about, so we've been asking you, how do you justify your belief that there's a God? And the things that you've brought out seem peripheral to that question, but they don't seem to address the question directly, especially considering that you've already agreed with us that things, a book might have some things that are true and some things that are false. Okay, so keeping that in mind, and if you mentioning other things that are true in the Bible is just adding on to that, right? It's just adding on to the list of true things in the Bible, and that's fine. But we want to know is the parts of the Bible that claim there's a God, how can we be justified adding that to the list of true things in the Bible?
Well, from the Bible itself, I would say the only facts or the only evidence would be, in my opinion, would be the prophecies that have come true, the prophecies that we're kind of living under at the present time in a lot of ways as well.
Can you tell me a prophecy that's come true? What's a prophecy from the Bible that's come true? What's an example of one?
Well, Israel reformed. Whether Jesus was prophesized in most of the books in actually all the books of the Old Testament.
But
the way in which
have we
fulfilled?
Here's the thing, though. We don't actually have evidence of Jesus. We don't have his body. We don't have his bones. We don't have anything. So what is an example of something we have seen with our own eyes, we've lived through, we have historical evidence of right now that I can Google it, we can pull it up, that is something the Bible directly prophesied that came true?
Like I said, the reformation of Israel. The fall of the
let's look at that. Let's look closely at a little bit more closer at that. So Israel, it said in the Bible that Israel would reform as a nation, and that happened. How does that lead us to the conclusion that there's a God?
It leads us to the idea that a human couldn't write it.
A human definitely could have written that. A human did write that. What we want to know is, how does that lead us to believe that there is a God? I could write, Israel will fall apart next week. Okay. Or we can write it. Whether or not it's true could be just a matter of happenstance or chance. In this case, I think it's not, because in this case, I think there was many people in the world that knew of that prediction that Israel would be reformed and that worked very hard to make that happen. Right. And so from that aspect, we can see that maybe it's not really a good prophecy, because people heard the prophecy and are in a position to make it happen. If Sydney says, Scott's going to say abracadabra at the end of the show today, and I hear her say that, And I'm like, oh, all right. I really want Sydney to be right about that. And so then I say it at the end of the show. She wasn't making a prophecy. She was saying something. I heard what she said, and then I did what I could to make it happen. And so if we look at this, we have Israel, in the Bible, if it says Israel is going to be a strong nation again, and et cetera, et cetera. And again, lots of people in the world know of that statement and are working very hard to make it happen. We could even argue that much of the Christians in America, right? These rare animals, according to you, are working very hard to make that happen in Israel. I'm sorry, I'm giving you a hard time a little bit, so I apologize for that. But how? So what? So the Bible says this will happen, and it happens. How does that lead us to be a God? That's clearly not the only way that could be true. We can say things and they can turn out to be the case, even if there is no God.
Also, empirical evidence doesn't lead to the existence of God. For example, in the United States, I'm not going to get into it, but there are patterns that happen where you can say this election is going to do this outcome because historically this has always been the pattern, and that pattern continues, and I say it's going to happen next time, and then it does. Does that make me somebody who can predict prophecies, or does that just make me paying attention, right? The person who wrote that in the Bible might have just seen historical evidence and patterns to suggest that something was going to happen and then wrote it, right? You can predict cycles quite easily, especially in human behavior and human history across time. You can predict economics. You can predict many, many things. And it is very, very rare. I can't even think of an example of times where those statistics are changed or the opposite happens, because that's how statistics work. So does that mean that because I predicted the outcome, because I paid attention to historical evidence suggesting it's never not been this way, that I'm evidence for God? Am I just...
No, it doesn't.
Okay. So can you think of another example of a time where the Bible predicted something and that thing came true and proved evidence of God?
I would say I don't believe. First of all, like I said at the beginning, I don't believe in proof. Evidence is a better word. I don't believe in proof. I think proof is the idea of proof is what to me is the number one flaw in our Western education system. I mean, it's a ludicrous
so you don't
idea.
think there's any proof? You don't think there would ever be any proof that God was real, even if the proof was in your favor? You still wouldn't believe it because proof doesn't exist.
Proof doesn't exist for any claim. Nothing to do with God or not God. It's to do with anything, whether it's solid matter, whether it's flat Earth, whether it's whatever claim you can make. You can't prove it. You can only evidence it or counter evidence it. Or both. Typically both.
May I offer a suggestion here, Jason? It's clear that you've put a lot of thought into this, and we appreciate your honesty and your candor. And I've really enjoyed this call. May I ask that you spend a little bit of time thinking about some of the evidence, some of the specific things that point to the existence of a God, and then maybe we can, because we've been on this call for almost an hour at this point, and maybe we could pick this call up at a different time, maybe after you've had a chance to reflect on it a little bit more. Does that sound something good, Jason?
It sounds pretty good, yeah. But some of the things I would like to talk more about is Turin. To me, is like slam dunk evidence.
Okay. I don't mean to cut you off here, but we do have other callers on the line here. And so maybe the next time you call in, we could focus on that. Do you want to do that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Well,
Perfect.
Thank you so much for your call, Jason. We really appreciate the discussion we've had. I think it's even though, in some places it seems like we weren't making a lot of progress, I do enjoy, like I said, I enjoy watching people think. And I think that you were being very straight with us in telling us how things are going on in your mind.
Yeah. And we always appreciate people who comment on our social media and then call in for the next show. That was really cool. We appreciate that you called in.
Definitely. definitely. But thank you so much for your call, Jason. We're going to move on to the next caller for now, but thank you very much.
Scott, before we bring on the next caller,
Sure.
I want to make an announcement first. But
Okay.
before I make that announcement, I'm going to introduce Sophia. Sophia has something she would like to tell us.
Calling all free thinkers. We are excited to announce that the ACA is launching its first ever fundraising campaign, Amplify ACA, in partnership with Amplify Austin. This is your chance to expand our impact by making your voices heard and supporting the shows that you love.
We invite you to join us on March 5th starting at 6 p.m. We're going to be doing a 24-hour fundraising event and camp out live at the Free Thought Library in Austin, Texas. We've got a great show in the works, a whole variety hour with our hosts doing different things, not just taking calls like you're used to, but we're going to have the fun facts and playing some games and lots of different activities. So be sure to join us from that. Again, it's going to be really exciting, and we're looking forward to having as many people involved as we possibly can.
Donating is easy on amplifyatx.org. Just search the word atheist. We're the only ones that will come up. And click the donate button. Follow us on our socials for more information.
And this is important. We want to be able to amplify the voices of reason and compassion worldwide. So we ask you, please, donate on Amplify Austin Day to make a real difference.
Yes, this is our first ever major fundraising campaign, and we need your help, anybody who's listening or watching, to make it a success. So mark your calendars for March 5th at 6 p.m. for our fundraising kickoff party and 24-hour live stream. Come on down to Free Thought Library if you happen to be in the Austin area, or join us online via the Atheist Experience channel and make a plan to donate if you could, and let's amplify the ACA together. Also, another way to support us is by sending super chats, as always. We'll read as many of them as we can on air, assuming that they are YouTube appropriate and don't get us demonetized. Perfect. All right.
Don't want that.
No, we don't. No, we don't. We want the opposite. But that being said, let's hear it for the next caller.
I think before we do that, though, let's look at our top 5 patrons. Did we do that yet?
Ooh, yes, we have not done that.
Yeah,
let's see here.
We need to give a shout out to some of those also very important to the show.
Top 5 patrons. Let's see here. I know we have a list. Here we go. Perfect. So top 5 patrons. Would you like to read them, Scott, or would you like me to read them?
Go for it. Go for it, Sydney.
Perfect.
But do I get to choose how your voice that you use?
You
okay.
do.
Let's go with, do you know Marvin the Martian?
Yes.
All right. Do your best Marvin the Martian as you read these.
I haven't done Marvin since like high school. Done Marvin's voice since high school. Chat, don't get gross. Oops, all singularity. Dingleberry Jackson. Kalevi Helvetti. Brian Zupke. J.A. Carlton. Honorable mention, Bethany P.
Not bad.
Okay.
That could double as your Kermit the Frog, I think.
Oh,
of course, those two characters do sound a lot alike, I think. But yeah, awesome Marvin the Martian. Certainly better than I could do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
But thank you to all of our patrons on Patreon. That's a great way to support the show. And let's and I do want to call out, though, let's get some super chats rolling. We do have an actual surprise. If we do get, let's say we have 20 minutes left in the show. Let's say if we get 5 super chats of $5 or more in the next 20 minutes, we have some special let's say childhood photos of our hosts today.
Oh no.
So we can share that. I mean, not if people don't want to do it, then that's fine too. But I want to call out to the people in the chat right now. Let's see some super chats rolling. And if we get 5 in the next 20 minutes, then we'll play Embarrass the Hosts, including our guest host today, Richard Gilliver. So we got that to look forward to. All right, so let's take a look at our next caller here. We have Everick on the line, she/her from Oregon. Everick is a theist and is asking, is God bad for creating a world with so much suffering? Good question, Everick. Can you hear us okay?
Great question.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect.
All right, what are your thoughts on that?
So, recently, I have begun to question a lot more whether or not God is real, basically. And I was talking about it to one of my friends, and I said I don't think God could be like good for creating a world where like 10,000 kids starve each day. But they said their like rebuttal, which I didn't really think of any way to refute it, was that God made everyone with agency. If there wasn't the option for bad to be done, there'd be no way to determine. There'd be like, without bad, there wouldn't be any way for people to be good. If God intervened anytime someone decided they were going to rape someone, then there wouldn't be any like consequences. There wouldn't be good people.
So let me ask you this. How is that fair, and how does that make God good to the person who that happens to? Right? When people do say that a lot, that is a common argument you hear where, well, God allows bad things to happen because you need to be able to make the choice to do the good thing. That would, in my opinion, that would only hold weight if God only allowed bad things to happen to the person who chose to do bad things. So if I had a choice to be good or be bad and I chose bad, that would only make sense to me in my mind, and that would only still make God good for this in the sake of what we mean by good for this conversation, if only that person had bad things also happen to them. But at the point where, say, for example, you're a devout Christian and you get assaulted and you get robbed or your spouse dies, why is God good for allowing someone to do that to you when you haven't done anything wrong?
Why is God good for allowing something bad to happen to me when I didn't do anything wrong?
Right. Simply for the sake of the agency of the person who chose to do it to you.
Yeah. Isn't it because if God didn't allow for people to make bad choices, if there weren't any ramifications for bad choices, if choosing to stab someone didn't do anything, then there isn't the option to do that.
Well, let me ask you this. Maybe I should let me rephrase my question. Which would make God worse? Not allowing bad things to happen to anyone, or allowing bad things to happen to people who don't deserve it simply because the doer deserved the opportunity to do it?
Excellent question.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I think I want to say probably the former, but if God didn't, continuing that train of thought, if God did exist and made it and prevented bad things from happening to good people, then there wouldn't be, I don't think there'd be like a distinguishable like bad or good. And if there wasn't like a bad or good, then wouldn't there be just kind of like morally nothing? Wouldn't things not?
Well, if there was no bad, then everything would be good.
Right.
Yeah,
right?
But if everything's good, then sorry.
So think of it this way. God created everything, and he created all the rules, and he created all the people and creatures and animals within it. So theoretically, if God wanted to, he could create a world where everything is going well, everything is perfect, everything is painless and cost-free and debt-free, and still give people the opportunity to follow him or not. He could create this perfect utopia and say, do you believe in me now? And still give people the right to say no, without rape, without murder, without robbery, without cancer, without illness, without the Holocaust, without any of these things happening. He could still create a world in which the things he claims to love so much are safe and secure and enjoying themselves, and they're not hungry, they're not starving, they're not thirsty, there's no disease, and still give you the opportunity to say, yes, I follow you, or no, I don't follow you. But instead, God's view of free will is allowing you, because you want to cause harm and death and tragedy to other human beings simply because you deserve the right to do it. Don't you think that a good God would choose the first version where he makes it the most wonderful utopia you've ever experienced and still gives you the opportunity to choose whether or not you want to follow him and his teachings?
I do. However, this is kind of where the particular sect of Christianity I am comes into play in regards to that question.
Okay.
Am I allowed to explain why?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. We'd love to hear it.
Okay, so I'm Mormon, and we believe that God sent everyone down to Earth as kind of a trial to let people experience life, to have the option to choose good or bad, and in the afterlife, the good people will go on. Good heaven is a bad way to explain it, but people will go on to the realm they deserve. All of the realms are good. Kind of. I'm simplifying a bit, but having the option to choose good or bad, determines where you go in the afterlife and what you do. It's not just do you believe in God or not? It's trying to make us good people.
Right. Sorry, Scott, continue.
I was just going to say, so you're saying that, are you saying that we need evil in the world? Is that what you're saying, that that's the best that God can do? I mean, can't God do anything? Can't God make a world with no evil? Even if we did have free will? I mean, the fact that somebody has free will means that they're free to do good things, right?
Yeah.
So why would somebody choose to do good things versus doing bad things? Because it's their nature? Because it's
do bad things?
Yeah. If somebody has freedom to do good things or bad things, why would they choose to do bad things? Would you say that it has to do with their personality and their nature and their, things about that person?
If you want to call this nature, you could. Self-benefit. People do bad things because it benefits themselves.
Well, let me ask you this question, back to your original question. Let's say that the Mormon faith is the correct form of faith and form of belief system, and what you believe is true, and that the better person you are and the more good decisions you make, the different levels of heaven you reach. And the different levels of heaven, while all are positive, there are more and more benefits the higher up that you get, depending on how good of a person you are. Let's say all of that is true. Does that make God a good God for making that the system? That's the question we're trying to answer, is less about whether or not that's true and more about, if that is the case, would you still call the person who developed that system that you have to follow good? My answer is no, because they have the opportunity to develop any system they want. And what they chose to do is develop a system that negatively impacts a lot of innocent people, simply for the sake of giving autonomy and free will to a few that decide to use it for evil and for bad. Do you think that even if that is the exact way things work, that makes God good?
No, but I think it would only be good if it's true that this system is the best way to accomplish it. If I couldn't think of any system that would permit people to become good and have a distinction between good and bad without bad things being able to happen.
Why do we need...
Does that make sense?
My question is, bad was invented by God in this scenario. Bad was something that God invented in order to give you the option to do good and do bad. If God didn't want murder to be a thing, it would not exist. If God didn't want sin to be a thing, it would not exist. So we are essentially rewarding someone who invented the bad. He invented the bad. He invented the good, and he always gets credit for inventing the good, but he rarely gets credit for inventing the bad. Rape would not exist if God did not want rape to exist. He controls that narrative. So is that a good God who, in a sense, does not need bad. If bad did not exist, we would not need to know the difference between good and bad, because it wouldn't matter, because we would be inherently good creatures or people. So is it a good God who says, in this existence where there's no such thing as rape and murder and sin and debauchery, I'm going to make it real when I don't have to, so that some people can choose not to do it, and that makes me happy, and other people choose to do it to innocent people who also want to make me happy, and at least I gave them free will against a thing that doesn't have to exist. They would not know they don't have free will if I did not make bad. But instead of creating a world where nobody knows they're missing out on bad, I'm going to create bad, and it's going to impact way more innocent people than guilty people, just in an effort to be able to say that I gave them free will. Is that a good God?
No.
I agree. I agree. And I think that's your original question was, is God bad for creating a world with so much suffering? And I think the short answer is, if God could have done otherwise, then yes, God is bad for making a world with so much suffering that was not necessary. Now, if you can show me that suffering is necessary, that's fine. However, if you say, well, we don't understand why there's so much suffering was necessary, well, that's fine. That might very well be the case. Maybe only a God could understand why that suffering was necessary. However, that means that I'm not in a position where I can justify believing that about the God. I'm not in a position where I can make that argument that God actually was doing something good. It might turn out that they were. If we're gonna go down that road, that God knows more about right and wrong than we do, then who's to say that everything that God does in the Bible is bad, but just we think it's good because we don't understand? I mean, once you cross that line of human beings don't understand what God understands, then everything goes out the window. And so we have to confine ourselves to human understanding if we want to have a discussion with other human beings. And where we're at with that is, God is bad. If God could have made a world without suffering, then yes, God is bad. What are your thoughts on that, Everett?
Yeah, I think and I hope I'm getting the name right, Sydney. I think what she said about, if you created a system with no bad, there wouldn't need to be the distinction between bad and good. That's right.
Or even if there was no bad in the world, we can still imagine what bad might be like. And I can imagine horrendous murders that have never happened. I mean, we have the facility to think up hypothetical situations. And so we can understand the difference between good and evil without evil staring us in the face. I mean, I don't see any thievery going on around me right now, but I can still imagine somebody stealing something. And so even if there was no evil in the world, we can still make a distinction between good and evil. We can still say, well, nobody does this, and maybe it's because nobody wants to murder. How about that? How about we just make people, they can freely do whatever they want. We just make them so they don't want to do it. I mean, that would be another alternative. But if the God has the ability to do otherwise, then yes, then they're evil.
That's the point. I think that's most important, is when there is the option to function fully and happily and healthily without being introduced to evil, and it's completely doable, and you can still give people some sort of free will, and you choose instead to opt into horrible evil, that's where, in my opinion, you go from being a good God to not a good God.
I agree. That's a logical distinction.
Yeah. And I would also like to make the distinction that you can be a true believer in God and not think that God is inherently good. that's something else that I've talked to some theist friends of mine about is you can think with your whole entire chest. You can believe that the rules in the Bible are right. This is what you have to do. This is how you have to live. And also that God is not inherently good. Those two things to some people can still be true.
Yeah. Well, with that, I'm not sure where I think, because I call myself a theist right now, but I'm very unsure of the whole God real question.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's a
Because
big question.
the only evidence I have is anecdotal, but and there's equal evidence for like all religions, and like the Bible and stuff. I don't really accept. I disagree with a lot of stuff. I am I'm transgender. That's pretty against a lot of Christianity. But doesn't. So anecdotal evidence is pretty bad evidence, but there's still evidence for. That's still evidence like for God across a bunch of different, like across the entire globe. Doesn't that kind of say something? If people across the entire globe have spiritual experiences.
No, it's a fallacy called the fallacy ad populum, right? It's our argumentum ad populum. You know, just because a lot of people believe something doesn't necessarily mean it's true. There was a time when, you know, everybody thought that the trees and the rocks and the river all had spirits. There was a time when everybody believed the earth was flat. There was a time where everybody believed that the sun actually disappeared at night. I mean, there's lots of beliefs that we know that have been very popular in the past, but turned out to not be true. And so, you know, that's what leads us to that particular fallacy, is just because if a lot of people believe something, it's going to give me pause. If I don't believe it, it's going to make me want to investigate why that's the case. And I think that's perfectly valid. And I think that's in many ways, that's kind of where you're at now. And I want to, kudos to you for being able to examine your own beliefs in that respect. I mean, it's clear that you have some doubt in you, and that's fine. And, you know, getting people to examine their own beliefs is a hard first step to take for many people. And so you've made the hardest step already. Now, whether or not you end up concluding that there is a God or there's not a God, I feel better knowing that you've at least approached it with this amount of intellectual humility and willingness to self-reflect. I think that's an ability that's lost to the world, in large part to the world these days, is the ability to look at oneself. And so that's really awesome that you're able to do that.
And I also think as you go through this journey, this questioning journey, we would love to hear from you again. We would love to have you call back as you research and discover things and learn things and come to certain conclusions. We would love to have you call back, because this has been one of my favorite types of conversations, where we were just asking you questions and you were asking us questions, and we were both coming to different conclusions and giving different examples. And so hopefully, as you go through this journey, whether it leads you closer to God or further from God, we would love to have you call back and have more conversations like this, because it's so helpful to break down ideas, and other people can learn from your experience and your research as well. So thank you for calling. We'd love to have you call back sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to call back.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to. We'd love to have you, Everett.
So helpful in answering my question.
No problem.
Thank you.
It was a great question.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Everett, thank you so much for calling. We really appreciate your call. And as Sydney said, definitely call back. I mean, one thing that I really like about Talk Heathen is our willingness and eagerness to continue longer term conversations. And so, we love it when people call back within reason. We love it when people call back and want to continue the conversations that we've had in the past. So really appreciate it. We really appreciate it, Everett, and we hope that you call back, and we'll look for you. All right.
All right, Scott. I'm going to move on to some super chats, if that's cool with you.
Sounds good
to me.
We're
hitting showtime.
Sounds good.
All right.
I don't know. Did we hit our 5 here?
So we didn't hit our 5. We did not. unfortunately.
It's probably a
and
good thing. Probably a good thing.
I don't know. I'm probably just going to go cry into my pillows after this, but that's okay. Just, maybe people want to see me cry. I don't know. Maybe that would bring more super chats if I just live stream that, if I just sob. And anyway, that's weird. I'm not going to go down that. So super chat, we got Blind Limey, a member for 1 year, $5. According to Christians, the utopia with free will already exists. It's heaven, though that's its own paradox if you think about it. So that is. And
True dad. It's hard to argue with that.
It is. I wouldn't want to argue with Blind Lemmy anyway, just because.
Yeah, he's pretty persuasive.
Pretty persuasive guy. So before we head out, I want to do a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank Richard for helping out today. Richard's been the backup host today, just in case one of us rage quit or walked off set or just got.
I was this close. I was this close to being out of here. This is the last straw. It's a good thing Richard was there in the background.
One of us gets raptured, So she's been lying the whole time. She got raptured, that liar. So thank you, Richard. We really appreciate having you as backup host every week. Now, Richard, what were some of your favorite thoughts throughout the show, or your favorite parts?
Jason, I want to say, first of all, Jason, I am so glad Jason called, because we put out every week on our social medias, Jimmy Jr. records a little clip inviting people to call the show. And it did one this week. It was posted on the Atheist Community of Austin's Facebook page, and it's exploded. Within a couple of days, it's got nearly 2,000 comments on it. I have invited the majority of the people who have commented on that to call the show. And Jason was the only person who took me up on it. So yes. Massive kudos to Jason for that. I would like Jason to call back. I know a few people in the chat were kind of frustrated by him. I think he was sincere. I have a few problems with a few of the things he was talking about, especially NDEs. There is no evidence whatsoever for NDEs. They are just simply the process of the brain dying. And the Shroud of Turin is one of those things that really, really frustrates me. Look, the Shroud of Turin could be resolved once and for all, whether it's authentic or not, if the Vatican just gave it up and allowed it to be used, but that would destroy it. So they're not going to do that because it's one of those for them. It's a little money earner for them. We could find out it could be resolved once and for all instead of all this speculation. The best evidence that has come out for the Shroud of Turin being authentic is that it is a 1st century piece of cloth. That in no way, shape, or form says that it is the burial cloth of Jesus.
I'm sold.
I'm pretty sure they had
I'm
multiple.
A Christian, I think now.
They did. I'm pretty sure they did have many pieces of cloth in the 1st century. So that I'm a little bit on. That's kind of dubious inference there.
Be a lot of cold people running around.
Right. No. Except for one.
Little known fact. That was actually the origin of the poly blend. So the fact that they have literal fabric is actually a big deal, because at the time all they knew was the poly blend. So this is actually big news.
Yeah. Look, both callers today have been absolutely fantastic. They really, really have. It's rare we get 2 theist callers who are so willing to engage in conversation and think about what you guys are so say. So hats off to both of them.
Honest conversation too. Honest conversation. That's key.
Yeah, absolutely. Hats off to both of them. You two did a great job. I'm out of here. I will see you all soon.
Richard out. All right. Well, before we close the show, I just want to remind everybody that we have open lines. You're always welcome to call in with your thoughts. You're always welcome to join us on Discord or on Facebook to just weigh in. The question of the week for next week is: a lesser known tree in the Garden of Eden is the tree of blank. Reply in the comments, not in the live chat. We won't see it if you do it in the live chat. Put it in the comments. You can also put it in the live chat, but if you want us to see it, put it in the comments of this video to enter to win one of our top 3 the lesser known Garden of Eden answers, or lesser known tree in the Garden of Eden. I like to think that a lesser known tree in the Garden of Eden was the tree of gut health, because I just think it's really important. But we can talk about that next time whenever we read through the comments.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm going to send out some love rings. send out love rings to my co-host Scott, to my co-host Richard in the back there, to anybody who's listening or watching, depending on the platform that you're on. We appreciate you, and we hope to see you again in the future. And if you do believe, we don't hate you.
We're just not convinced.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live, Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.